The Tarrant County Master Gardener Association has partnered with the Tarrant Regional Water District to encourage water conservation. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean that water to meet drinking standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and many others, to provide water conservation programs to the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of our growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people living in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler's checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home, provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. So be sure and check out SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for their free services.
I am Sian Rees. I'm a master gardener, and thank you everybody for coming and joining us tonight. I'm going to talk to you about landscape design basics, but I'm going to tell you a quick story first. When I was 12 years old, I announced to my parents that I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And they said, no, Sian, you need to have a backup plan. You're not going to make any money doing that. So I thought about it and I said, well, I'd really like to become an interior designer. And at the time, back in the 80s, they were like, no, you need to have a backup plan. You need a job that you'll make some money. And I was like, oh, okay. So I got a business degree. I went and worked for a multinational tech company, and I made some money and I was super happy. And then when I was about 38, I decided, okay, I'm done. And I went to design school to become an interior designer. And so with that background of mine, I went to school and I practiced interior design in Los Angeles, where I helped investors flip apartment buildings in the Valley. And it was a really cool job. I ran my own business, but I was able to use all of the things that I had learned from my interior design degree, in which I also got in LA. So it was very hip. I hung out with lots of really cool cats, but we learned a lot of things in interior design that not only apply to the interiors of homes and apartment buildings, but to the exterior. It actually matches exactly. So anything that you might have already learned about exterior design, aka landscape design, is very similar to interior design. So what I'm going to do today is I am going to simplify design basics. And actually, I'm going to go to the next slide here. And I want to share with you my philosophy on design and designing a garden here in Texas. So I have a design background, but I'm also a master gardener. So I've combined the two to be able to create beautiful, functional outdoor spaces that don't take up a lot of water, but are exceptionally beautiful. And based on my philosophies, I really just look at a garden as an extension of my home. So my garden is like another room in my home. And I think you should look at that too. If you're looking for inspiration, which I suspect you are if you've signed up for this class, if you go with that philosophy and say, oh, well, when I come out here, I want to sit down as if I were sitting in my living room, which is why I have a picture of my patio furniture here. Then you can relax. You can enjoy it as a personal space. I am also a big fan of personal spaces in gardens. So each one of you has a completely different garden, but you might be looking at your garden and going, it's just a big square backyard, or it's just a big front yard. What do I do with it? And part of my philosophy is to take that big space and turn it into lots of smaller spaces. So I love to create little sanctuaries, little areas. You might have heard the word vignette before, which is very fancy, but it's just for a small space that looks nice and is enjoyable. And I also like to have interesting transitions from one space to another. So I love to use pathways and little stepstones and arches that you go through. My garden tends to be a little bit more on the whimsy side. I don't look like the Palais Versailles, where every single plant is the same and every shrub is sculpted beautifully. My experience, in my garden is sort of a lovely walk of whimsy from one space to another. So as I'm sharing that philosophy with you, I'm just going to move on to the next slide. I'm going to encourage you to think about your garden in a different way. Now, some of you might have a brand new space and you're looking at it and going, what do I do? Some people have lived in their space for 20, 30 years and they just are used to looking at it in a certain way. And I want you to say, to yourself, I'm willing to think outside of the box and think about no straight lines. That's a big thing that I am. I can't even draw a straight line if I tried because I'm a creative type. But try not to follow along the lines of your fences. Try not to make things all on right angles. Your garden, even though you think it might be completely flat, is not. It's got undulations, there's little grade changes. And so just think about sort of winding pathways. You should be, hang on one second, I have to just move this because it's blocking some of my words. There we go. So your garden is a palette of colors. So a lot of people feel like, oh, I have to have it all matchy, or I've got to represent every single color, or I've got to do this, or I've got to look like something, out of a magazine. But your plants, the colors and textures that you have from your plants, really you should consider them as paints. And if you have certain colors that you love, just go gangbusters with them because color makes people happy. If you want to be surrounded by red in your garden, just go for it. Because when you're outdoors in your garden, you really should be feeling happy and inspired by the colors there. I say in my slide here, no monoculture. So monoculture, one way of looking at monoculture is that you have all of the same plant or shrub or tree all over your property. This picture that you're looking at here right now is the opposite of monoculture because my garden is sometimes compared to sort of a botanical garden. I have a sample of everything in my garden. This is my backyard or part of my backyard. So monoculture is when we plant all of one shrub everywhere because we know it's safe, we know it works, unless we have a terrible storm or something that kills all of our Indian hawthorns, and that's all we had on our property, or all of our loropetalum die because of some storm or some drought. And then you're kind of stuck with nothing. It's also kind of boring just to have all of the same thing. And so everything that I focus on in the presentation today is also with an emphasis on drought tolerant and water conservation. I became a master gardener because I wanted to choose the right plants. And the right plants are the ones here in Texas that aren't very thirsty and can handle a little bit of abuse, whether it's cold or hot. But the last thing I'm going to say about thinking about things in a different way, create your own space. Your space should reflect you and not something that somebody's told you that you should have in your garden. But also, once you've planted something in your garden, it's always going to be growing. It's always going to be moving. You should be willing to evolve with it as it gets bigger and bigger. Or it sprawls, or it passes away. Sometimes shrubs only last 15, 20 years, and you have to replace them. I have some annuals in my garden that require a little bit of water, but I just keep them in pots. In this picture, I have on the left-hand side, I have a pomegranate tree, and it's up against the brown fence you can see there in the photo. And I had to replace it after the biggest storm, but that thing is a different shape every single year. And I trim it and I baby it. Some years I wrap it, but it's a big focal point in my garden. And so I have to kind of go with what it wants to do every year. Fingers crossed this year, I hope I get pomegranates again. It's been about 3 years. Anyway, moving on to the next slide. Let's see here. What am I doing? No. Okay, there we go. So we're going to talk about hardscape versus softscape. And I'm just using this so you know the terminology, but hardscape is anything that doesn't need to be watered, is essentially what I like to say. So in this picture that you have here, it's another part of my garden. I have a greenhouse. I have a granite pathway that needed a little bit of weeding. I have a lot of loose stone that I use. I love to use limestone pieces. It's kind of saw cut. And I create all sorts of interesting garden beds. And if I change my mind about something, I just move it somewhere else. But I don't cement it together, but I make beautiful edgers with all of my stone there. You can see I have some rocks in my little vegetable garden. To the left in that picture is actually the putting green. My husband's a huge golfer, so we have that. You don't have to water the putting green either. There's very little in this picture that requires water, yet it's absolutely beautiful. A lot of other things that you can use as hardscape. I go to town with pavers. You go to Lowe's or Home Depot or any of your garden centers, and they come in all different shapes and sizes. And there's pavers, and then there's also retaining blocks where you can build like a raised garden. And I will use my retaining blocks to make edgers around trees. And I will use my pavers and stack them to make little steps. It's kind of like my Lego for my garden. But and you can also have arbors and trellises and things that you can grow things on. And your fence is your hardscape. So don't forget about your fence. You can use that to get roses to climb up there. You can hang a nice little piece of garden art. All of those things are all part of your landscape and design. Now, the softscape is what needs the water, and that's the plants, shrubs, trees, soil, mulch, grass, flowers, anything that will either grow or start breaking down. Mulch is soft. Mulch is wonderful. You guys always need to mulch as you design because it increases your water retention by 30%. But at the same time, it's doing that, it's breaking down and turning into soil. And so it's constantly evolving. But as a softscape material, it's absolutely wonderful. And don't be afraid in your designs to have negative space. I have friends who like to fill every single inch of their garden with something just because they feel like it needs to be filled. And then you end up having a garden that looks like a ransom note because it's just everything all over the place trying to jam in there. And so just think about open spaces. And sometimes your eye just needs to rest on a space that doesn't have anything in it, like soft or hard. And another thing that I like to say when you're choosing to do softscape and plant things, and this is just a number one thing that we say as master gardeners, is you should be putting your plants in softscape near water. You know, if you feel like you want to design something brand new, check your water there first, because a lot of people don't have the luxury of having an irrigation system in the space that they want to design. And if that is the case, then you really want to consider hardscape and beautiful gravels and something cement, some statuary, and try not to use more water by creating your new design. So I'm going to move on to the next slide here. So these are the principles of design. This is like the magician telling you how the trick is done. A lot of people have hired designers because they don't feel like they're competent to design a garden themselves. A lot of people feel the same way about interior design. They're like, oh, they know how to do all the magic things that make things look beautiful. There are 7 basic principles of design, whether it's interior or exterior, that will empower you as garden designers to feel like you can do something exceptional in your garden just because it's a principle. It's a thing that we use all the time. And these are so I'm just balance, harmony, unity, rhythm, proportion, scale, emphasis, focal point, contrast, and details. So you don't have to take notes on this because I'm going to cover all of them now and give you examples of them and how you can use them in your garden. So balance is important because your brain loves balance. Your brain is always trying to kind of achieve balance in everything that it looks at. And you're not aware of that, but it's just something psychological that as human beings, we look for. So on your left-hand side of the screen, you're going to see symmetrical balance. And this means that this garden, if you put a mirror against it, it's a mirror image. Each side of the garden is identical. So you could fold it in half like a piece of paper and everything would match. And this is a beautiful way to design. And it's very pleasing to the eye. The only downside to it is if we have some extreme weather here in Texas and you lose a few of these plants, then you're not going to look perfectly symmetrical. Things are going to look a little bit out of balance. So unless you have absolutely perfect gardening skills, absolutely perfect luck here in Texas, I wouldn't advise on perfectly symmetrical gardens. Rather, I would say embrace asymmetrical gardens. So if you look on the right-hand side with the slide, you still have the same space and you've got a layout where there's probably some similar plants that are identical to each other, but none of it is done in a mirror image. So you have groupings of things, you have everything arranged the same way, but it's different on one side versus the other. So also to give you another example of symmetry versus asymmetry is the illustration in the center, because that will show you the same vegetation, the same plants, just in a different arrangement. And the reason that the bottom one is asymmetrical is that you've got some weight with the little bird bath and the blue flowers on one side. And then you have a little bit more visual weight with the one striking tall tree on the right-hand side. And so that is the balance that you're getting with an asymmetrical design. And I'll go on to the next slide to show you a little bit more here too. So this is a way of fixing, hang on a second, I gotta move. I've got a little display thing on the side, I have to keep moving. So here are two examples, before and after, of how to achieve balance. So we're trying to achieve asymmetrical balance here. So on the left-hand side, you can see that there's a rather large tree at the back of the garden. There's a little patio. There's a whole bunch of shrubs on the left-hand side. There's a bunch of little shrubs in front of the big tree. But then you have this large space on the right-hand side. And I can tell you that if you were walking out onto your back patio and you stood and looked at all that, you go, oh, something's missing. You feel like there's this void on the right-hand side. Your brain will just say, hey, something's missing. And so by looking, if you look now over to the right-hand side, you can see that, I guess someone with a computer graphic here has changed the image. It's not that easy to change the tree, but you could put something in the corner that would be similar to the three purple shrubs. You could actually line along the side of the fence. But what you've got is you've got some weight on the other side of the garden now, which achieves balance. So that is asymmetrical balance there. There's an example of that. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to go on to the second principle, which is harmony/unity. And you can achieve harmony and unity in a variety of different ways. But essentially, when you see harmony and unity in action, it means that everything looks like it is put together. So this is kind of where you see something that looks like it's come out of a magazine. It looks very curated. It looks like someone's like, ooh, they really planned this. This looks really good. It's not what I call, again, my favorite word, the ransom note, where you've just slapped a whole bunch of things together. So the left-hand slide is color. This is where you've gone for harmony and unity in color. And I'm sure some of you here have experimented with doing like a garden all done in white, or a garden where you've just chosen all similar colors because they give you joy. I love this fuchsia color. It's absolutely beautiful. This is kind of a shady garden here where someone has put very sort of fresh green and pinks in, and it just looks very cohesive. On the right-hand side is my Japanese garden that I have. And this is something I created after first Snowmageddon. Everything was destroyed in 1/3 of my backyard. So I said, well, hey, I'm going to start again. And so because it's underneath an oak tree and it's very serene, quiet, cool place with just lots of natural water, it just gets very wet back there. I created something where the unity, the piece that held everything together, it was that it had an Asian influence. So I put in some decorative elements. I did a beautiful little walkway. You actually have to walk behind a whole bunch of shrubs to get to this little part of my garden. But everything in there is done like a Japanese Zen garden would be done. So if you ever feel like you want to do that, just get a book and look at some of those Zen gardens, and you'll find they're very peaceful, but they all have similar plants. Some of the plants that we can work with here are Japanese holly ferns. They're excellent. And I have some leopard plant back there. Hosta's a little tricky. You have to have a really wet spot there. And then I put in some Japanese yews. And so all of that, the style of it is an example of unity. And okay, I'll just move on to the next one. I thought I had another slide, but rhythm is the third principle. And there's a couple of types of rhythm, but rhythm is something that makes your brain very excited. And a lot of interior design principles, as you're guessing now, have to do with the way that people think and how they feel. But achieving rhythm in your backyard is a really fun, exciting thing. It's going to be the thing that, like, when people walk into your backyard and see your new design, they're like, wow, this makes me feel excited. This gives me emotion. Visual rhythm is something where you're looking at something and your eye might go up and down, like on the fence line here. So this is the top half of the illustration that you're looking at. And as your eye does that, it causes excitement. It actually, they've proven that it raises your heart rate when you're seeing something like that. It's like a serotonin boost. And you can also have physical rhythm, which is in the illustration, this the bottom half of the illustration. And that is when you're actually walking through a garden that has a path, or you're walking underneath an arbor. So if there's a path that leads you to an arbor, you're walking on that path and then you're going through the arbor. It's like a little maze or just a little experience, but you're moving along and it gets your heart kind of pumping and it creates excitement in your garden. So, and I will show you for more examples of that in a second, but this is my favorite principle. I can really get like a garden going and making it look really exciting by doing these two things. So here's some examples. This was a garden bed on the very left-hand side. I arrived at this garden and there were Yopon hollies and they had all been carved into these little balls. And I was like, oh, boring. Sorry, but like, this is monoculture. We all have it in our gardens. If you have an established garden, everyone did Yopon hollies a long time ago. They're fine. They're great for the environment, but they need a little zest on them. So what I did is I put in this, it's not coleus, it's celosia. It's the kind that has the orange, pink, and yellow spikes on it. So when it was blooming, it had all this exciting color. But what I did is I built this little bed along the Yopon hollies to create this pop of color. And so your eye would not only look at the Yopon hollies, but it would look at the little line of flowers as well too. And it just really amplified the look. The middle picture is where I went into somebody's garden and it was very, very tiny front garden. And it was just a little strip in front of the house on both the left and right hand side. It was very symmetrical. And they just didn't know what to put in the middle. And so I pulled out some dead things and I put in these paver stones for this customer so that they could actually walk and wander through their tiny little garden. It's a townhouse. And so you're getting what we call that would be your physical rhythm that as you're walking through. So you're doing your steps, you're looking through, you're looking at the little Yopons. I added some flowers at the end as well too, which just made it very pretty. On the right-hand side, I added some edger and I just put gravel down in front of a set of shrubs that were fairly healthy, but the grass that led up to the shrubs was dying because of shade. And so I decided I would again make I would go congruent with the set of shrubs and put this gravel in so your eye would get excited and it would make your eye move even more along the edge of the shrubs. And so those are just examples of, I guess on left and right hand side would be visual rhythm, and then the one in the middle would be physical rhythm. But these are all very, very easy for all of you to achieve. These are other ways of creating, using rhythm to create visual interest. So you can simply just take some pots. You can take 3 identical pots, put them in a row by your front door and have the same sets of flowers in them, all 3. And it's your eye looks at it and goes 1, 2, 3. And it's just like you've got this, your brain is like, ooh, this is interesting. On the right-hand side, someone has taken a lot of time and effort with some concrete balls that I guess they're fun. I thought that for the sake of this example, I thought this was a good picture. But again, you have rhythm. It's this repetition that goes, you see them and you count them. And as you're coming to the front door, your brain is having this little excitement and journey as you're seeing this little repetitive pattern. So these are easy to achieve. And notice how with the right-hand side one too, we're not using a lot of vegetation. We've got a lot of rock and, concrete here. So it's, it's stuff that you don't need to water. So now I'm going to talk about the next principle, which is proportion and scale. So if you have a very small house, you have to be very careful not to plant really, really big things around it because the proportion of it, your eye will look at it and go, something's not quite right here. And your house might end up looking a little shrimpy, a little overwhelmed by very, very large trees. Now, we need trees for shade to keep our houses cooler and to have nice, shady, cool spots in our gardens. But if you are making a decision to plant something for the first time, I highly encourage that you read the labels on any plant that you're buying to see what the mature height is. That's what you're eventually going to end up with. And so I see a lot of people buying crepe myrtles, and they live in a single story house, and the crepe myrtle is destined to become 20 feet tall. And you feel compelled to always, cut the top of it off, which you should never do. But the scale of it is just going to mess with everything, and your house is going to look small. A lot of people with larger properties will look and get little tiny plants and go, why aren't they growing fast enough? And they don't look very big. And I guess I can point to this picture that's on the right-hand side, the before picture. This is not my house, but I believe this is like a courtyard area that someone had where I think they just simply put in some little nandinas because they wanted to fill the space. They just went in a straight line against the wall because they felt like that would be something just to fill it. And they did basically exactly what I would have done is I would have created a little small space out of the big space. So if you look at the after picture below, you can see that somebody put some planters and an archway, probably about 12 feet in front, and put some little paver stepstones in and created this little room. And all of a sudden, I'm sure you're looking at it going, yeah, you know what? The proportion of that looks so much better. So they've broken up a large space by making it into probably two smaller spaces. And I think it's very visually pleasing. On the left-hand side, I have an example of a little outdoor patio. And this is probably like a little dining area because you can see some trees. And so someone's put in some beautiful perennials. They all look like drought-tolerant perennials. I think there might be some Turk's cap back there. Someone's used some stone. It's a tiny bit raised. So I think this is a very good example of proportion and scale, because if you do have a dining area and you want people to enjoy your garden and you're going to be out there, you want everything to be at eye levels so people can enjoy the scenery, instead of having very large trees, which if you had tall trees, they would just be kind of towering above you and maybe possibly making you feel like something was going to cave in on you. So I feel like that is an example, a good example of proportion. Now, I'm going to show you, hang on a second. I'm just going to show you another picture. I think this is a really good example. So I'm just going to have to move this little display thing down here. Okay. So we have a before and after of a good example of proportion and scale. So I bet you there's some of you who have a tiny little shrimpy area in their backyard and they're like, what the heck do I do with this? I like being outside, but it's a hot mess. Where do I start? And so this is two pictures. So on the left-hand side, you can see that some people have got, I think it is a kind of Yopon holly or maybe an abelia up against the fence. And then you have some other similar shrubs. I think it might be boxwood actually, on the front there by the air conditioning unit. And then there is a cement pad, and then there's some grass that's really hard to manage. And then it looks like they have a patio there. So what they've achieved, what they did, whoever did this, is they pulled out the big boxwoods and they put in some little tiny, tiny shrubs. So you can see 3 green shrubs. And then they put all the gravel that looks like Colorado River rock around that. That is excellent proportion, because if you compare the two photos, you can see that the hot tub looks bigger, that everything it looks in better proportion. It looks like you've got a lot of space to put in the grass, which is actually artificial turf, which I like. But you've got space to look at things. You don't feel crowded in. You don't feel like the shrubs are going to kind of fall in on you. And so I think this is an excellent way to achieve proportion. So if you have a very small space, look around you and see, do I have really big shrubs in there? And I'm going to remind you that shrubs only last about 15, 20 years. If they start getting hollow on the inside and you keep trimming them to make them smaller, it's really time for them to go. And you can find small shrubs in lots and lots of garden centers. Abelias are wonderful. Barberry is wonderful. I think that's exactly what those two are there. Abelia is my favorite shrub to garden with. It's very drought tolerant. It's very, very pretty, and it's green all year round. So I'm going to move on to the next principle, which is, whoops, there we go, which is emphasis and focal point. So remember when I said vignettes, when I said small spaces, when I said going to little cozy areas in your garden where you have an enjoyable thing to look at, to enjoy. It's like your house. So this focal point can be anything in your garden. And you might already have these focal points, but you can have many, many focal points in a garden. So it's what your eye is drawn to first. It's the very first thing, no matter what it is. It's a tall tree. It's a beautiful shrub that has gorgeous purple flowers on it. It is a fountain. It's one of those things. And when you have a focal point in your garden, you want to arrange things around it. You want to have your eye travel and take a little path over to that focal point. And you can achieve that just by putting some stepstones down. And I've shown you pictures of that already. You can achieve that by having, if you look at the top left-hand picture there, you can have an arbor that you walk through to get to the focal point. You can highlight a wall behind it. You can see the yellow wall there. It could be a fence as well too. Someone's put some panels on that yellow wall, and the table and chairs become even more of a focal point now, something for your eye to look at. And this way, if you're trying to figure out, like, where do I start with my garden? What's the very, very first thing I could possibly do to design my garden or make it look better, is look for the natural focal points you already have in your garden. And you probably have several. You just need to kind of look for them. And once you've found them and you agree with yourself that you like them, you design around those. And that will make it a lot easier for you with your decision making. So here are some of my favorites. I'm going to give you some other of my favorites as well too later on in these slides. I'm going to be sharing a lot with you. But on the left-hand side, we have a Peggy Martin rose. This is actually 2 climbing roses on an arch. And I planted these. I plant these for all my friends because master gardeners love Peggy Martin roses. They're in all the nurseries now, and they're not that expensive, and they climb, and you can wind them around any kind of arbor, and they bloom like you're seeing in that picture through April and May, and they're absolutely beautiful. And they'll bloom for many, many more months after that as well too. But this is at its peak. And so if I can put a Peggy Martin somewhere, I have one in my garden, and it's a focal point to the back wall of my garden, and it's like 10 feet high. And your host tonight, Dick Paffer, gave me a little tiny sprig of it 7 years ago. And I just love that thing. So I made it a focal point. Peggy Martin rose. Don't forget that one. In the middle is a flamethrower redbud. And redbuds do very, very well here in Texas. They are the little small ornamental tree that keeps giving, because at this time of year, they have little pink flowers all over them. This one here I purchased in May, and flamethrower redbud, all of the new growth comes in red. And it is just spectacular to look at. And those leaves stayed on until November. So I had something absolutely gorgeous to look at. So I have placed that at the front of my Japanese garden. It draws people over to my Japanese garden. And once they've hit that flamethrower, they start walking through my Japanese garden. And I have some lovely plants below it as well too, that are, the red buds like a little bit of shade. So I've got some sort of shade type of plants below it as well too. Then you have something on the right-hand side there, and this is my Victoria agave. And she is lovely. She grows very slowly. She's very regal. She's very spiky, so you can't have her like somewhere where someone's going to poke their leg on her. But put her in a beautiful pot like that. And she is the center of the attraction of where I have all of my flower pots in another area of my garden. So simply putting the most beautiful succulent you can find in a pot, if it makes you happy, that can be a beautiful focal point as well too. And you design around that. So here's another way to create a focal point. And this is just me with Adobe Photoshop. And I was just scribbling on a photograph that I had. So this is on the left-hand side. This is kind of a mounded bed of most likely perennials, probably too many grasses. I tend to use a grass as a focal point, or an edger, but not in a full amount like that. But you need to take that whole sort of scrambled mess of beautiful perennials and give them a little bit of order. But if you look my scribble on the right hand side, you can see that I'm recommending that you would put like a flowering, small ornamental tree right up at the top there. And the reason I would do that up at the top is because it kind of then starts blending in towards the house. And so it softens the transition from the bed itself to the house, it draws your eye up there, it creates some movement. And you could probably put an Althea Rose of Sharon tree there, or a redbud, a small ornamental tree. But then if you're doing that, then you want to kind of create a little bit of rhythm. So at the very bottom where I've done those little yellow groupings, I am suggesting that you have 3 of the same kind of thing along the bottom there, something sprawling if you want this nice perennial look, something that grows kind of low. Thing I'd like to mention in garden design is that you want to put the tallest things at the back that are closest to your house and the lowest things at the front. And to decide that, you always look at the most mature height that they're going to get to. So you could put something at the front that you could put, so Blackfoot daisies, or you could have some skullcap or something like that, but have like 3 big groupings of it. And then where I've put those orange circles there, you could have 4 small lobelia kind of in a pattern there. And then up at the top where the blue little scribble is, you could go gangbusters with just tons of beautiful perennials there. Those ones look like echinacea, or purple coneflower, and they're very drought tolerant. They're just lovely. And then once you establish that as your design, don't feel like you have to stick to this beautiful design, because remember, I said that your garden is always evolving. So if you feel like you want to put some stuff in between all of that as well too, it's your garden. You can absolutely do it. But a garden design, when it looks designed, it does look intentional, looks like it had some original order to it. It doesn't just look like a mess of plants. So I'm going to move on here. Oh gosh, I still have a lot more of this contrast. Okay. So contrast is a lovely principle to work on. And I've done some before and afters here. And you can see on the left-hand side, there's a top picture and a bottom picture. And this was a house where I put in just the simple white limestone edging, and I put in some black mulch afterwards. And you can see with the before and after, the contrast that you're looking at is the white against the dark brown mulch, black mulch. And it's very striking. It will make your garden look very designed, very intentional, very tidy. And it's that contrast. Your brain loves to look at this black and white kind of thing. On the right-hand side, I've gone again with a before and after picture. And I have those 3 little rocks there because the person I was working with was trying to decide on the color. And I said, white, you got to do white and contrast. It's so sharp looking. So we pulled out the liriope and a couple of dead shrubs, put in some annuals, and boom, you've got this beautiful contrast. And there's some visual rhythm there too, right? You can see that with the curvy bed that you have there. Contrast can also be achieved by using the color white. And I always love to put white in any landscape design. If you're putting flowers in somewhere, especially in shaded areas where the color doesn't pop out as much, I highly recommend white, because it just really, if you were looking at this picture in black and white, the white hydrangeas and the white variegated leaves of that plant there really show up. So they really make your eye, pop around your garden, and it's makes it a lot more interesting, a lot more contrast that way. The last principle is details. Don't forget about the details. And so if you feel like you have a fairly designed garden and you're happy with it, but you're still looking to put something else in there that makes it interesting to the eye, don't forget about your landscape lighting. And I have a variety of different landscape lighting installations. Some came with my house. I've been at my house for 15 years. But some of it, I felt like I needed just a little bit more light. And so it's very easy to put in string lights. I have these LED string lights that I've put over top of my little putting green. And so I can putt at night. My husband and I both golf, but You can see too that I've got some uplighting on the trees. I've got some little pathway lighting, and it just really helps you enjoy your garden that much longer. It's also good for safety, but I go out in the evenings when the sun's set just to go look at it at night, because your garden is just so delightful at night as well too, with a little bit of lighting. On the right hand side, I've got a little frog. I collect frogs. I have a theme. It's unity in my garden. So every single little statue I have in my garden is a frog. But I just put him in a pot and I have him next to my little gloxinia plant. And it was just something that little tiny detail just made it a little bit more interesting. If you want to fill your garden with lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff, try not to clutter it up too much. Try and have some unity with all of your little things that you want to add as details. So I'm getting closer to the end of my presentation here, and I have a tendency to chat if you haven't guessed, and there's going to be time for questions. But I am going to encourage you again to think outside of the box with your design. So if your fence is straight, don't feel like all of your trees or shrubs have to reach the top of the fence. They can go above the fence, below the fence. Go for the curvy lines, because curvy lines are so much more interesting. I've covered some of these other things here. But do think about the ceiling of your garden as well, too. A lot of people just look at what their eye can see, but think about tree branches that are above you that are creating a sort of a beautiful effect as well, too. And maybe just trim a few branches just to sort of have a different effect. But always think that, above you as well, too, is really quite delightful. I guess the lights that I just showed you in the landscape lighting would be the ceiling of my garden as well, too. So as a reminder, you need to make sure that you're planting in places that are appropriate, that you are planting for success. In other words, don't go and get yourself a whole bunch of new shrubs and not check your soil. We have terrible soil here in Texas. I typically put new soil in my beds about every 3 to 5 years. And you can just put soil on top of what you already have there. You don't need to plow it in or anything like that. But we have very sandy soil and clay soil. So just make sure that that's good, that your irrigation is working. Once you've planted, you mulch on top. The correct plants are, I've seen a lot of people put shade plants out in the sun and then wonder why they burst into flames. So just, be aware of that as well too. Just because I've shown you all these beautiful designs doesn't mean you can kind of put all that stuff out there and just say, hey, it's going to look great. You want it to last a long time. And everything that I suggest in a plant is really drought tolerant. Look for Texas natives, look for drought tolerant plants. There's a lot of resources through Tarrant County Master Gardeners that will give you some fantastic drought tolerant plants. The Lady Bird Johnson website is amazing for suggesting drought tolerant plants. If you're going to be planting something on a hill, be very careful, because we have all these crazy rainstorms that wash all your soil away, cause erosion. And if you're going to plant something beautiful, are people going to be trampling all over it? Are cars going to accidentally drive over top of it? And so think about that. And just because I've said to go and do it, make sure you also check with your HOA. I don't have an HOA, but I know that there are some rules with certain communities where you do have to ask permission before you design. Here's an example of a drawing that I did, and I'm showing this to you because I'm going to encourage you to do field drawings. When you're thinking about your design, if you're starting from scratch, get yourself some graph paper. I just have this it's just a pad of graph paper that I use every time I'm thinking of doing something new in my garden. And I only really garden for myself now. I'm a retired landscape designer, but I love getting my graph paper out and a pencil, and I start scribbling. And then once I start scribbling, I then label what some of my ideas are. And I do it in pencil because I change my mind all the time. But this was the little townhouse garden that I designed for the people where I said, go walk through your garden. This is where they had like a physical rhythm of walking through their garden. So do a lot of sketching. And I don't use computer graphics or anything like this. You don't need someone to do a big computerized plan for you unless you feel you need to. They cost a lot of money. A computerized plan usually is minimum of $500. So if you can do some sketching yourself and take it to a garden center, It'll help you with your planning. Here's me just doing a project just to show you that I actually do the work myself. And I was out there today not doing this, but I decided I wanted a peach tree and I had no room for it. So I said, well, I'm going to have to design a bed then. I'm going to have to extend one of my beds, which is me thinking outside the box. The bed that was there already had been there for years. And all of a sudden I realized I had all this lawn that I was watering and I'd rather water some plants. So I just carved out the grass and I didn't have to dig deep. If you're going to dig deep, make sure you call 811 and make sure they flag out that, you're not hitting any gas lines or anything like that. But I just used paver stones. And you can see in the center picture, I have 2 layers. These paver stones, I made sure I had some irrigation in there afterwards. And then I filled it with all sorts of gorgeous perennials. I love to get my brag book out and show you. It's absolutely beautiful, but it was very, very simple for me to do. So just getting the grass out is tricky because I couldn't put landscape fabric down on top of that soil. So I really had to make sure that the grass was removed. When I put the paver stones down, I put some sand down as well too, so I could level them. And for a while, the grass tried to creep back in, but now it's actually pretty much under control. And the peach tree is about 12 feet tall. So I'm going to have one more slide after this, but I encourage you to go to our website because there's a ton of resources there. And there's a help desk that's manned. You can phone us. We have people answering the phones all the time, especially at this time of year. And no question is silly. If you just want to know, you want to know anything, you can ask questions about grass as well too, and insects. But if you want some suggestions on drought tolerant plants for the shade, or what are some Texas natives, there's a person there who will answer your call. If you don't get a call, you want to email, someone will answer your email within 24 hours as well too on a weekday. And like I said, the Lady Bird Johnson website for Texas plants is absolutely spectacular. And I use that a lot. And anything also, if you want to go to Texas A&M, because we're extension agents of Texas A&M, A&M, anything that ends with tamu.edu, their websites are amazing as well too, just for ideas and resources for the appropriate plants. You're not going to get a ton of design advice there. That's why I came into this presentation today. But you will find the right plants. And it really is important to consider that. A lot of people here want to put in hydrangeas because they're really, really beautiful. But hydrangea has the word hydra in it, which means it needs lots and lots of water. So I would really advise you to think through your plant list so that you are putting some things in that are drought tolerant. And it's not necessarily because you want to save, you want the plant to thrive or a certain way. It really is, how much water are you using on these plants to keep them alive? You've seen the type of summers we've had here recently. So I think we've recently become zone 8B. So we're getting hotter. And so you just want to have the best plants, the most success with your beautiful designs. So the last slide that I'm going to go to, it's got a lot on it, but this is where I'm sharing more of my favorite combinations of things. So if you feel like you have your garden beds all lined out, if you feel like you've already got the flow in your garden and you're not going to do any more hardscaping and you're just saying, well, what do I put in these beds of mine, my beautiful beds? These are some ideas, and these are all from my garden or from, I just take care of a couple of gardens now for people up the street. But these are all beautiful, drought tolerant, just wonderfully adapted plants. So in the picture where you see the beautiful blue, mealy blue sage, so that's on the top left there. I love putting blue and yellow together, or even purple and yellow together. And it's because these are opposite to each other on a color wheel. And so they complement each other. They're complementary colors, and they just make each other look better. And it's kind of like me and my husband. We're complementary to each other. We make each other better. In the background there, I have some lantana as well, too. That's orange, but the lantana at the front is yellow. And so all of these are incredibly drought tolerant, and these get hot, hot, hot western sunset sun in my garden. And actually, they're planted in that garden bed that I was showing you that I extended a couple of slides back. So that's a wonderful combination. In the middle top, I have just a single flower I'm just going to show you, which is the oak leaf hydrangea. If you have not planted an oak leaf hydrangea in your garden and you want to, you can totally do it. This is the one hydrangea that does really, really well here in Texas. And it tends to do very well in kind of a soggy corner in your house. So if you have a house where when we get big rainstorms, you get a soggy corner and it's a little bit shady and you're like, I can't grow anything here. You can put an oak leaf hydrangea in there. In 2 years, you're going to have something that's 3 feet tall. And they're great for filling a big space. They do need shade. They can handle a tiny bit of sun, but I don't have to do anything with an oak leaf hydrangea. And they just give these beautiful blooms. And you can put 3 or 4 of them together and just have a huge hedge of them if you want. And they'll look a little scrimpy during the winter, but they're absolutely glorious. Right now, and if you look at the top right, bridal wreath spirea does really, really well here. And it is stunning. It is an example of contrast. It's an example of a focal point. And if you don't ever trim this thing and you put it somewhere where maybe it's going to cascade over a wall, you will just be in love with it forever, because they call it bridal wreath because it's kind of like it just comes down like a veil. And I've seen bridal wreath spirea where it's cascaded down like 6 feet and it's just big and gorgeous. If you don't want it that sprawly, you wait till it's finished blooming in the spring and then you trim it back. Bottom left is beautyberry, and it's also called American beautyberry. And it's so, so pretty because it has a lot of visual interest and repetition in its leaves. It likes some shade. In the middle at the bottom there, that is hardy hibiscus with canna lily behind it. And both of those can handle a little bit of like wet feet. So hardy hibiscus doesn't like hot afternoon sun, likes a little bit of wet feet. And then the canna lily that's on the right-hand side with the orange, you put that in areas where you're just always having kind of a mushy, wet spot and you don't know what to do with it. Just always put canna lilies in there. And they're so striking because they're tall and they're elegant and they've got this beautiful pop of color in the back and the top. I have them in the back of my yard as a focal point that people look towards and then they move over to the side of my garden. So written down on the left-hand side, and I know you're going to get this presentation afterwards, but the combos that I talk about, I also encourage people to get a Texas mountain laurel or an Althea rose of Sharon. Both of those, I have 5 rose of Sharon on my property and 5 Texas mountain laurel. And you have to do like virtually nothing with them. They're absolutely gorgeous. They make it through our weather. Focal point, beautiful, just gorgeous. Lantana, drought resistant, huge amounts of color. I already talked about some of the other ones here. When I talked about the redbud, the flamethrower redbud that I had, you can put a beautyberry below that. And then maybe some false Aurelia, which is a Japanese plant, but false Aurelia does well here in the shade. And we recommend that. It does well here. So you can do that combination of 3 and put them together where the false Aurelia is at the bottom. Looks gorgeous. You can take your oak leaf hydrangea in a shady, somewhat wet spot and put holly ferns next to it and Texas gold columbine. All 3 of those will do really, really well in a shady spot. Just make sure you have a little bit of water under there. When you put black-eyed Susans out there, dang, they're beautiful. I had a black-eyed Susan for a while, and then I got a rabbit, and this is at the front of my house. And so the rabbit kind of ate the black-eyed Susan, but I have mounds of them in the backyard. And you put blue next to that, and it looks gorgeous. Greg's blue mist flower. And then you can put some monarch milkweed behind that because that gets really, really tall. You're going to have so many butterflies and bees. Abelia as well too can be your little handy shrub in that mix as well too. Just a gorgeous combination. Greg's blue mist flower, if you didn't know, attracts monarch butterflies, and I will pair that with milkweed, and then I'll put a hardy hibiscus next to it, and you get tons and tons of butterflies like that as well too. I don't have a picture of my coral honeysuckle right now, but if you put that on an arbor, You've just created the most gorgeous focal point, and it's a no-brainer because the coral honeysuckle will just crawl all over that. And then I talked about the bridal wreath spirea. So I've managed to do it. I got the whole presentation in there with all of my design ideas and the principles. And I hope that makes you feel like you've got some tools in your toolbox now to do some things with your garden without feeling like you have to spend a fortune on a designer and without feeling like you don't know what to plant or how to approach it. Um, like I said, start with a focal point, start with something that you love looking at. Don't feel like you have to stay within the lines. You don't need straight lines. And make sure that you create something that you alone absolutely love and adore and enjoy while you're out in your garden, and be prepared to evolve with it. And you will find great garden happiness. So, thank you so much for your time. That ends my presentation. And I hope we have some questions that I can answer.
You do have.
Okay. Oh, I do. Okay.
Yeah.
I've just
Oh,
been
yeah.
chatting away. This is my favorite thing to talk about. I was obviously so. Fire away.
Okay. The first one is, what's good to use in a yard that's prone to flooding in terms of landscaping, assuming the French drains have already been installed?
Okay. If you have a garden that's prone to flooding, I would suggest raised beds for starters. The side of my house, the part that got destroyed by the storm, it was having problems because it was always getting flooded anyway. So it was already stressed out. But if you can raise your beds, if you look at the picture of the bridal, is my presentation still on? Are the
Yes.
pictures still up? Okay. So the bridal wreath spirea that I have on the top right there, you can see I have a 4-level stack stone raised bed there. And that's because I had a really low lying area there. So if you have a raised bed, and you just make it out of stones or whatever, and then build your garden on that, that will definitely help. Your soil's not going to get washed away. And that has been my saving grace in that part of my backyard. Additionally, canna lilies, just all day long. You put canna lilies in there, and they love those wet spots.
Okay. Janet wants to know, what's your take on hot colors versus cool colors in Texas gardens?
Okay, so I think a lot of the hot colors tend to be like the plants that seem to be really heat tolerant. I see a lot of lantanas and coreopsis and the daisies, and those things can take sun all day long. I don't think there's a direct correlation. And if you're wondering, this is, can you put them all together? I'm not sure if that was the question, but I do feel if you want some unity in your garden, instead of putting a rainbow of colors all in one spot, if you're going to put hot colors together, you would be putting the reds, oranges, and yellows, and that would look absolutely lovely. And the cool colors, you can do the purples and the whites and the pinks, and that all looks harmonious. But if you want to put a whole bunch of colors together as well too and have a rainbow in your garden, I think that looks spectacular.
Okay. Kim said you mentioned the wet areas of your yard,
Yes.
and she's interested in designing a rain garden or a swale. Can you speak to these and see how they do, and maybe some resources where she can learn how to do that?
Okay, so first of all, figure out the source of your water, I would say, because some people have a lot of water because it's coming off of their roof, and it could be an erosion type of thing. And you don't want, if you're planting something in a rain garden, you don't really want it to get washed away. I know that over at BRIT, the Botanical Research Institute of Texas, when I say BRIT has incorporated some rain gardens where they use the runoff from their building to water several lengths of garden. And I think they have it so that at the very end of that garden, the water gets held in. It's not kind of just like something that's going to wash all the way through. And I would I would say a rain garden's lovely. I think it's a great idea because you don't have to water that spot. the area that I have that's really wet on the side of my garden, I barely water at all. But sometimes we get a drought and you need some water. So you need a little bit of a backup. But I would go to the Brit website and I would probably go to A&M's website because they do a lot of research on things like that. And A&M has a lot of good articles on things like that.
Okay. Ken says his problem is that his backyard is basically total shade. So he needs ideas on different types of shade tolerant plants and maybe ground covers.
Okay.
He said it's not a large backyard.
Okay. Well, ground cover is lovely. And I'm going to say embrace ground cover as well, because once you have ground cover growing in there, like um, jasmine, Asian jasmines are really good ground cover. It actually cools the ground while it's being the ground cover, and it holds water in as well too. Some people have shade gardens that don't have a lot of water. So if as long as you have some kind of water source, Ken, you'll be okay. But there's are we having like a sound issue? I just think
I'm hearing it wherever it's coming from.
as long as everybody can hear me, is fine. So in my shade garden, I have a variety of things. I would highly suggest putting in an oak leaf hydrangea. I have a small Japanese maple. Japanese maples, some of them need sun, a little bit of sun. So if you have places where you're going to get a little speck of sun for a few hours a day, that's good too. But they like to be understoried. Japanese maples like to be under other trees, as do red buds as well too. So those would be good for a little bit of height. The beauty berry that I have on the slide with the beautiful juicy berries on it is fantastic in the shade. And there's something called a cast iron plant. It's a little bit expensive, but they do like a lot of shade. Japanese holly fern, super, super great for the shade. Leopard plant is another one for the shade, and it has lovely yellow speckles on it. And like I said, hostas, but hostas need a lot of water. They're a little fussy. So those are some good ones. And just remember, go with the tallest ones closest to the back of your fence and work towards the shortest ones at the front. Oh, ajuga. Ajuga is another one. Ajuga loves the shade and gets these little blue flowers on it in the spring. It's really, really nice.
Okay. Val said they had to rip out their front landscaping for the foundation work. So they have a blank canvas.
Okay.
And they'd love to put in a pollinator garden there. So what plants would you suggest for that?
All right. So, oh my gosh, there's so many. So many Texas natives are chosen because they're great pollinator plants. I would say lantana all day long. Greg's Blue Mist all day long. Those are kind of lower to the ground. Those are really, really good ones. If you're going to put in some monarch milkweed, that's really helpful. But it really only grows kind of in the fall. So you can't really find it at nurseries unless you want to grow it from scratch. Echinacea, which is also known as purple coneflower, excellent. Black-eyed Susan is excellent. There is something called a flame acanthus, which attracts hummingbirds, and it's got little red flowers in it. The hummingbirds can get nectar from as well too. Anything that is a salvia, if it's got salvia or sage in the word, the bees just love that. Absolutely love it. And don't forget the ornamental trees. If you put an Althea in, which is the Rose of Sharon, bees and butterflies love that as well too. And if you go to the Ladybird Johnson website, you can actually filter plants based on what kind of pollinators are interested in that particular plant. So with all of those, oh, and also too, if you're going to start from scratch, I don't know how big your garden bed is, but if you're putting in perennials, the pollinators, I try and do them in groups of 3 because then you get a nice big sprawling area of that one particular perennial, and it looks a lot more dramatic.
Okay. Rachel wants to know, what are some good drought tolerant plants for a shaded area?
Okay, so yeah, shaded areas, it's can be a little bit tricky. Because if you have shade and it's dry, you need to make sure you're using mulch to hold in whatever water you get in there. And but in terms of drought tolerant, I'd look for things that sprawl a little bit more. So again, oak leaf hydrangea. I keep going back to that one because it just does so well with very, very little water. And the thing that helps that out is the fact that it's self-shading. So it's big, it's kind of like a lot of little umbrellas together. So what it does is it keeps the soil below it cooler and it holds the moisture in really well there as well too. So for the shade, it's definitely drought tolerant. I know that you can plant columbine and it does really well as well too. It's very drought tolerant. I would suggest Texas Gold as the one that really does the best. That is the one that we all kind of gravitate to. I've put other columbine in my garden before, and it just hasn't done very well. So look for Texas Gold. And the smaller nurseries carry it. Like sometimes it's hard to find it like at a Home Depot or Lowe's, but that would be my recommendation. And beautyberry again, the one with the berries all over it, super drought tolerant. I have one growing in a shady area in my front yard, and I guarantee you I do not water it at all, and it grows just beautifully.
Okay. If you add a bunch of rocks to your garden, doesn't it just add heat to the hot Texas sun and fry your plants?
No, not really. I don't think when you're talking about rocks that are kind of fist size or smaller, they'll get some heat on the top. But if you have enough of them, it creates more of a barrier than anything. We sometimes use rocks as mulch. So if you ever have dogs that dig in your yard and you're like, I can't stand this, instead of doing the wood mulch, you can just put gravel down and that acts as mulch as well too. It is a barrier. And I think for you to touch it with your hands, it can be hot, but I don't believe most of the rocks we get to are white as well too. So I've never experienced that heating up my garden.
Okay. Recommendations on a tree to provide shade, but she doesn't want it to be, they don't want it to be too big and it's in full sun.
Okay. Well, one of my favorite trees that doesn't grow very big is the chinkapin oak. And I recommend this to a lot of people. I'm not sure if it's Texas native, but it's very adaptable.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Texas native. Okay. So the chinkapin oak does not get very, very big. And it has kind of a round growth to it. So you can be under it. You can stand under it once it's fully grown. And it's a nice thickness to it. Just doesn't create shade in the winter because it loses about half of its leaves. So I think that would be a lovely shade tree. If you're looking for something, smaller ornamental tree, it also have a Mexican plum, and they can get to be about 10 feet high at the most, and they can take full on sun. And don't forget the fruit trees as well too. My peach tree is just absolutely beautiful. Doesn't get that big. I advise that anytime you're shopping for a tree, though, always look and see what the final height is going to be, final growth when it's at its max, what it's expected to be.
Yeah, they need to worry about the height and the width, because they don't want to put it up too close to the house or something like that.
Right. But a chinkapin oak, the way that it grows kind of in a ball but it's not like a crepe myrtle grows kind of upward triangular, that kind of thing. Whereas I think the pattern of the chinkapin, you don't really have to do much. And the leaves on the lower branches, it all tends to grow a little bit outwards. So I think it's a great tree for smaller spaces and lots of sun.
Yeah, they're beautiful trees. They
Yeah.
really are. Let's see here. How tall does Greg's blue mist get?
Greg's blue mist won't get any taller than about 4 inches. It's a ground cover. It's not invasive, but if you leave it without kind of keeping it in a perimeter, it can kind of start sprawling after a year or two, but it's very low lying. It's lovely. You get so many butterflies on that.
Okay. What privacy option to put in front of a fence in your backyard for a shady area would you recommend?
Um, Shady area, privacy. You do something like an Eleagnus, and they grow really fast and they like shade and they typically don't get any disease. We lost some of them in the huge storm, but the speed at which they grow is really quite spectacular. And so for privacy, it's one of the three I recommend.
Okay. Um, if you have a huge front yard that's completely flat and boring grass, any ideas to xeriscape it using design techniques you recommended? That won't annoy my neighbors, they say.
Okay. Okay, well, create a curvy bed. And if you're xeriscaping, you can, I would just stay away from anything that's a straight line. So have a curvy bed that kind of undulates kind of outwards, use some nice edging. Um, Sporadically put in a low level juniper. There's like they're kind of like ground cover junipers. They don't grow very fast. They're really good in dry areas. You can put in some color guard yucca and you can put in some agave. Those they do really, really well. And then don't be afraid to put in a rock, a designery rock here or there. Just make sure that when you're xeriscaping that you kind of pretend you're in the desert and don't space everything equidistant from each other. Don't make it look too intentional. Try and kind of take maybe three large rocks and kind of group them together and put maybe one on off to the side. And don't be afraid to use three different types of gravel as well too. You can use a decomposed granite, crushed granite, which ends up being pinky. You can use river rock, which is gray. You can use drainage rock, which is white. You can put in bigger rocks, which are Colorado stones. And then you can put mulch on top in areas as well too. A lot of people are going the xeriscape way. There's a lot of pictures out there that I don't know if you've ever gone to a site called House. It's spelled Houzz. And it's an interior design site, but they also have hundreds and hundreds of pictures of gardens. And they tend to do a lot of those xeriscaping gardens.
Okay. Do you have any resources you should suggest for learning more about color theory?
I do not. That's just been embedded in my brain for a really long time. But I do like, I think Southern Living, even I don't know if anyone's familiar with Southern Living magazine. It really doesn't apply to us with the plants, but they do a beautiful job with the colors, color combinations. Better Homes and Gardens has some gorgeous ideas as well too. I'd look to magazines for ideas, but color theory, if you got yourself a basic color wheel or you Googled color theory, it's pretty straightforward. You either have complementary colors, which are the colors that are beside each other on a color wheel. Or did I get that right? No, I didn't. Complementary colors are opposite to each other on the color wheel, whereas there's the colors that are side by side, adjacent. You can work with those as well too.
Okay. Any book you'd recommend just for inspiration?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I have like an entire wall of books. The book that I used to copy a lot of pictures, I can probably send you the name of it. It's 25 years old. I checked. You can order it on Amazon used for $14, and it's been my Bible. And I apologize, I don't have it here with me right now.
Okay. Anthony wants to know. He said he's heard a term called a dry garden, and he wants to know what that means and does it need much water?
I think the term dry garden tends to be used very loosely. So I think there's different definitions of it. And I think it's a combination of xeriscaping, where you're going to be using extremely drought tolerant plants, but one that just relies on the rain itself. So is another way that I've heard it described. And I would think that it could also be what I've just done in my garden. I'm very proud of the fact that I just ripped up my entire lawn because I don't want to water it anymore. And so that's a dry garden. And capped off all of the sprinkler heads. And I just said, nope, it's just going to be gravel. So I think people are moving towards dry gardening simply because we know what it's like here in Texas. We can see patterns and we can see how we're getting hotter summers, and it's getting harder and harder for us to water things to keep them alive. So,
Okay. How do you balance flowering plants with foliage and grasses?
well, I'd love to have all flowers everywhere, but I know that during the winter, a lot of my perennials will just disappear into the ground. I tend to have, I'm going to say about 50-50 is what I have, shrubs and flowers. But when it comes to my flowers, perennials versus annuals, I try and do as few annuals as possible because it's just more of a carbon footprint. I like my annuals, but I probably do in my garden about 10% annual and 90% perennial, just so that I'm not replanting things all the time.
Okay. What are good drought tolerant shrub for areas that get full sun?
Abelia all day long. I love abelias. Um, they just do really, really well. And there's about, gosh, the last time I checked, there's like 10 different kinds, all different color leaves. And not only are they drought tolerant, they are pollinator friendly. They're kind of like my favorite best shrub in Texas. And you can not even prune them, and they will get to max about 4 feet tall. But I have seen them survive every kind of weather event here in Texas. So Abelia all day long.
Yeah, they're wonderful plants for sure.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Is there a lot of difference in full shade in summer and no shade in winter?
Um, that just depends on your garden because you might not know this, but your garden has a lot of different microclimates. So I can't necessarily say that planting one, if you plant the same plant in two different spots at your house, it's going to react in two different ways. So if you want something, if something says part shade here in Texas, I tend to almost put it in full shade because you know how it gets here in the summer. And so you kind of have to use your judgment a little bit based on the amount of sun or shade you're getting at your house in the spot that you're at.
And I
So
think they're
I probably would, when someone is recommending shade or saying that it needs this or that, like take a lot of other things into consideration, where you are, how protected the plant is going to be. It can tolerate a lot more if it's closer to the house versus if it's out in the open.
okay. Yeah, I think they're thinking about large, trees that lose the leaves in winter also.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, not sure on that one. Sorry. I think I'm not sure I can answer that one.
Well, everybody loved it. There were a lot of comments. They really
Okay.
appreciated everything. And I don't see any more questions now.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone going overtime here. I could talk all day about plants because I just love gardening here in Texas now that I got empowered when I became a master gardener and I knew what I was doing. So I hope that the information I shared with all of you is helpful, and I wish you happy designing and happy gardening this season.
We got one more.
Oh, okay.
How deep would you be digging that you should call to have lines checked? I think
Uh,
it's all the lines, and I don't think you'd have to worry about the depths that much because it may not be that far down in the ground anyway.
it's not that far down in the ground. My FiOS internet connection is 5 inches below the ground.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's not even in a conduit. So I would say like, if you're in an existing bed, like where you've planted before and you know, like where all the sprinkler heads are, typically you don't find a gas line in a bed that's in the middle of your yard. But at the same time, you just never know what utility's been put where. And I've been at my house for 15 years, so I know where everything is. So if you're going to remove a tree, definitely call 811. If you're putting something in, like even a 3 gallon, like little perennials, I wouldn't worry about too much. But if you're putting in shrubs, especially along edges of driveways or around your house, anywhere near your water lines, gas line. So if in doubt, call 911, sorry, 811, and they'll come out and flag your property. And it's free. It's their obligation.
Yeah, and she's really worried about removing grass, and I can speak to that because if somebody comes in and does it, a lot of times they're going to till that soil before they put the new grass down. So you definitely want to know where everything is.
Yeah, I almost had that situation because when I removed my grass a couple of weeks ago, they found a wire and I was like, oh no, it's the internet cable because it's been cut by my plumber once. And when they put it back in the ground, I know they only put it in like 5 inches deep. And we were lucky. It was an old wire, so it didn't affect anything. But after that, they had to remove around that area by hand.
Yeah, and the same will happen with outdoor lighting. I've got some outdoor lighting, and those get cut real easily too.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't go hacking into the ground, but, um, you know, you're not going to build your garden overnight. As you're planning it, I poke a few little, dig holes in established beds and just, but if you're going in like building a new area somewhere, definitely calling 811 first is a must.
Anthony says if you don't call 811, you may have to call 911.
Freudian slip. I already said 911.
Okay. Well, just a reminder, everyone will be sent a copy of the presentation. It will be converted to a YouTube. It will be sent by Heather at the Tarrant Regional Water District. You will also be sent an evaluation form. We ask that you please complete that form. Let us know, let them know what other presentations you would like to see, because we really appreciate your feedback on those. Okay. All right. I think we're done.
Great job, Sian.
Thank you. I really enjoyed
Thank you, Sian. Great information.
Thank you.